Rodney, I hope you're having an awesome day. Welcome into the game here in T-Town.
Doing great, Ryan. I hope you are as well.
Let's go back. I know we spent some time late last week talking about it. Tua Tagovailoa goes to Miami. It's like they had no hesitation. They just walked up to the stage and said, yeah, we'll take that left-handed quarterback out of Alabama and try to build a franchise around it. Any thoughts about Tua going to Miami?
Well, I also read something, Ryan, where they pretty much made the decision 15 months ago that Tua was their guy. And in spite of the injury, they pretty much stuck with him all along. Especially when they realized that, he was had recovered extremely well and was medically cleared. So, you know what? I just hope that they can get good players around him, surround him with great players, because especially in that league, quarterback, no matter who you are, if you don't have players around you, it's really difficult. And it looks like they had a pretty good draft to me. So maybe they're getting some really top-notch guys, and Tua eventually win that job, and we'll see.
Rodney, when 4 players go in that first round, first time in, I guess, over 50 years, and I need to go back and exactly what year it was, but 4 players on the same offensive side of the field gets drafted from one team. Over 50 years since that's happened in the National Football League draft. I mean, that was a special offensive unit here in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, and they all went in the top 15.
Yeah.
Think about that. Man.
Wow.
Incredible. You have 2 receivers go in the first round. Quarterback, you haven't had a quarterback go since, I think it was, 44 years. I know it was Richard Todd. Went number 6 to the Jets. First time Alabama's had that. And since then, 1976 draft. And then, of course, been very successful producing offensive linemen, offensive tackles in the first round. Dredrick Wills kind of keeps that alive. So, had a great first round. Was really hoping Xavier McKinney, the safety, would slip in, later in the first round. Didn't happen. Still, he got with a good, I think, organization with the Giants. And just a tremendous night for Alabama. And having 9 go in the top 3 rounds, pretty incredible to me. I really thought if there was one that stuck out to me, I think you might have asked me last week. I can't remember, but we talked about Anthony Jennings being a guy that I really felt like may go later, but would have a chance to have a superb career in the NFL. And he went a little higher than I expected, and I'm really glad to see that with the 3rd-round pick to the Patriots.
Well, and I think Anthony Jennings is one of those guys that you think about. I mean, I think it's a perfect fit. I mean, look at what New England's able to do, and I think he can be used in a lot of different formations. But you back up and you think about Raekwon Davis and Terrell Lewis, their stock kind of, it went in run on us for a few months. I mean, think about where it was last year, this time, and where they ended up getting picked. Their stock maybe not worth as what we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, the thing is with actually, and you're right about that, but the way things kind of played out this season, I thought their stock had really dropped, and maybe they even went higher than what I expected. I guess Terrell was about the same. Would he go 3rd round?
Yes.
So that was probably what I would have said maybe. But Raekwon ended up 2nd round, and if I recall correctly, and that really surprised me just a little bit. He has all the tools. I mean, there is no question about that. He had a really good ending to his sophomore year, and people thought, okay, here we go. He's going to be the next dominant guy. And then in 2018, he just kind of had a disappointing year, bounced back a little bit last year, but still was very inconsistent, sometimes didn't show up. But Raekwon has all the tools, so, he's got a chance once he gets on this level. We'll see. But, again, I thought overall very, very successful for Alabama to have 9 players in the first 3 rounds.
Well, look at a guy like Trayvon Diggs and Xavier McKinney.
Yeah.
Might have slid a little bit, not much. I mean, Xavier McKinney still first safety off the board, but you look at overall, you think about Xavier McKinney, if he comes back for another year, if you look at Terrell Lewis comes back for another year, it's hard for me to say that if they come back and prove one more year of stability, that they're not making more money. I look at Jonathan Allen. I think Jonathan Allen's that great example of improving his stock. And there's a big difference between 15 and in that early second round. There's a significant money drop with the way the NFL does it with calculated picks.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure. I can't remember exactly the grade that Xavier McKinney got. He might have gotten a first-round grade. I'm not sure. I don't recall.
Yeah, neither do I.
As far as was it Trevon Diggs? Not Trevon Diggs. You said Terrell Lewis. I'm sorry.
I said Diggs too. Diggs and McKinney slid a little bit. I mean, I think they were lower than what we thought they would be, because he was 19th pick in the second round, and I think we saw projections from Trevon Diggs was top 20 pick, right? I mean, I know at one time my Cowboys were looking at him in that 16-17 range.
They're very excited to get him. Obviously, I've got a lot of connections back there, and I know that they're extremely excited to have gotten him with that. I think it was the 50th overall pick. And then Terrell Lewis, you mentioned he had another year. He could have come back another year. I just think that, because he was redshirted due to injuries, just his injury history was something that I think made him really fearful. I think he sometimes played this past season a little, I don't want to say scared, that's not what I mean, but he certainly, I think at times protected himself a little bit. And, I think he just wanted to try to get while the getting was good.
Rodney, the name, image, and likeness, where do you stand? Because now we're watching the NCAA push it a little, ahead, and now we're waiting some, it went through one step. Where do you stand? Well, you've been around college athletics for a long time. You cover recruiting. You understand what it takes to get high-profile players to campus. When you look at the name, image, and likeness, tie all that together. What do you think is a good move for college athletics?
Well, I'm Ryan, I'm kind of old-fashioned a little bit. I'm not for it, to be honest with you. I've never been for it. And it's just because going back, old-fashioned, the way I believe, these guys, they get scholarships. Those things aren't free. They get an opportunity to get an education to help themselves and their careers and their futures that most people don't get. These are free education. And I think there's to me, this is just me, and I don't know it all, but I think we've lost a side of the value of that. And it bothers me a little bit. On the flip side of that, this is the direction it's going. It's been obvious that this was going to happen, so it is really what it is. And in some ways, I think, it is a positive. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. These guys that will have opportunities to how it affect recruiting, because you're going to have guys that are going to have opportunities to get these endorsements and what have you. And you look at Alabama. I'm just thinking about Alabama. And again, I know there's probably a million things that I don't understand about this and don't see, but you look at Alabama. What bigger name is there in college football? What school generates the highest TV ratings and all of those things? You don't think Tua Tagovailoa or Jerry Jeudy or Henry Ruggs or whoever it might be that's a star player here that they've had here. Derrick Henry in the past. You think about all the great players that they've had here, and then you look forward to the future. And then again, who knows what's going to happen? But throw out a name like Bryce Young. You don't think a Nike or someone would want to grab him and snatch him up early? I just think that, when you're a school like Alabama, which let's be honest, there's not another school in the SEC, with the exception of maybe LSU, that I think that visible. People may argue Georgia or whatever, but I just look at Alabama and I think that brand is, certainly will be very helpful, and it would. I think this could benefit Alabama.
Well, and Rodney, I don't expect you to know the answer to this, but we've proposed this a couple of days. When you think about the Alabama brand, okay, let's just take an example with Bryce Young for a couple of seconds. Bryce Young comes in, he plays here, he gets a lot of endorsements. At what point does the school get a little bit of that too? Because you're part of an Alabama quarterback. I mean, that name Alabama. I got to debating this the other day on the air. Does the school get a little bit? Let's say simple math. We invite you over and we do an autograph signing, or $1,000. how much should the school get? Because I think they're entitled to a little bit of that. I mean, because you're kind of using that script A, right? Your value wouldn't be where it is if you were playing at La Tech.
Mhm. Yeah, and again, we don't have enough time to, and I can't think quickly enough, Ryan, to think of all the things the considerations that would go into that. I mean, there's just so many different things, but I'm sure all of those questions will come up,
sure.
and all of them will eventually find answers. And I think Pat Forty wrote an article. I saw a little bit of it. And one of the points he made is, frankly, we don't have all the answers right now. Anytime there's major change, you do it, and you don't do it with having all the answers sometimes. It's just the move that you make, and then the answers eventually all come. So, it's difficult to answer that, and it's going to be interesting, though, to see how it all plays out, and see how it impacts recruiting all across the country, to me.
Rodney, let's get an update on recruiting. What have we learned in the last, 7 weeks, 40-something days here, I think, 44, 45, 7 weeks, the adjustment. What have we learned about Alabama and the recruiting side? Has this helped them, hurt them, kind of maintain the same?
Well, I don't know yet, to be honest with you. Generally, Nick Saban, they do a great job of adjusting. They're probably better than anyone sometimes. Now, a few years ago, you remember when they went to the early signing period, and I think Alabama did not have a good read on that. And I think Nick Saban even kind of talked about they had to make some adjustments, and they realized that the early signing period was going to be, that's when they have to really kind of get a majority of their players lined up and signed. That first year, they really didn't take that approach, and it kind of hurt them down the stretch because the pool was so much, there weren't as many prospects to choose from, and you had more schools going after those prospects. So, you look at this, and I really just don't know, Ryan, exactly how it's, going to impact, or if it's to what extent or in what direction it might have impacted Alabama. But I will say this. They've got 3 commitments. Some people are kind of concerned about that a little bit, but they are in on a lot of players, a lot of top-notch players. And if history tells us anything, it tells us that, Nick Saban, most of the time, has a plan, and it works pretty well, and especially in recruiting. I can only think of that one time when maybe it didn't work out as well. That was the 2018 class with the early signing period. So, we really don't know, but I will say they're in on a ton of players, and there are some high priorities that I think, for this class to be successful, that I'm really kind of keeping an eye on and seeing how they do, and they seem to be in on some top players at those positions.
Rodney, do you feel like that there's a bigger need at a certain area above the rest?
Well, I think, to me, I mean, there's several. First of all, it used to be that you could have a great recruiting year or two, and then if you didn't have a great one year, it was okay. But that's really, I think this now you've got to have great years. Just you have to string them together back to back to back. I mean, you can't afford to have an off year, or to eventually catch up with you. And I think that right now, if I'm just looking at it, I don't know what, I'm not going to claim to know what's going on over there in that recruiting room, but I would say this. I'm looking at offensive tackles. They need at least one, and I think 2 high quality offensive tackles, and other offensive linemen too, interior players as well. So I think the offensive line's a priority. I think receiver is a priority because, you lost 2. You're going to lose 2 more next year in Waddle and Devontae Smith. This is a big year for receivers. They've got a Jai Hall committed. They've got some other guys that are really top-notch receiver prospects. Brian Thomas out of Louisiana, who I think Alabama's in good position with. Corey Brooks would be another one. They're recruiting several slot-type guys. Mario Williams is one. Christian Leary is another. Both those guys from Florida. So, they're in on some high-quality guys there, and I think they're going to do well. So we got tackles. We got wide receivers. I think they need a high-quality tight end or 2. They've recruited. They're pretty loaded at running back. So I think they're okay there. regardless. And quarterback, they need to get one, but who's willing to come in and compete with Bryce Young? That'll be the question. On the defensive side, you always want defensive linemen, and they're in on several. They've got Anquin Barnes committed, who I really like him. I think he's significantly underrated, and you'll see his stock rise. But they're in on some really good ones. One that I would mention would be out of Belleville, Michigan, Damon Payne. And I know that was the first stop Saban made. It's the first school he stopped at when he went out looking at visiting underclassmen, their high schools back in the winter. So that's a guy to really keep an eye on. Linebackers, they signed several last year. They're in on several again this year. And secondary, I think, is a real key. I think they really want to have a top-notch secondary class. Quincy McKinstry's to me, he has to be the number one player in the state for Alabama because he's a guy that is at a need position. He's a high-quality athlete as a cornerback. So he's a guy out of Pinson Valley to keep an eye on. And then there are several others they're in on. They're in on some good safeties. Terry and Arnold from Tallahassee, Florida. I think Alabama leads for him. And one other guy I'll mention while I'm throwing out some names, Jason Marshall. About a week ago, we did a little update on some of the DBs they were recruiting and said, here's a guy. It's a 5-star player, just like McKinstry, 5-star corner, 6'2", probably 180 pounds. A lot of people don't understand exactly where Alabama stands with him, and we said we think Alabama's in a lot deeper than what people knew. He's from Miami Palmetto, and he released his top 3 yesterday or so, and Alabama, Florida, and Clemson in no order. But so Alabama's in strongly there. So with all that said, I kind of covered what I think are the important spots, and that's several of them.